meeting of the month of the new ELHS at Little High School. This is the building committee meeting. You all know that Tom is not here. God, he's watching us, but we're moving on. So let's hit the road. So what do we got going tonight?
All right, we'll hit the road. So welcome, everyone. I feel like it's been a really long time since we've met, but it hasn't been that long. So for tonight, our agenda is, first off, we'll do some introductions of our theater consultant. We'll have an update from our subcommittees. We will take a look at some test fits for a revised or sort of condensed design statement. We'll go over some updates of the athletics programming, a programming update in general, and then progress today. And so we're really excited to have John with us tonight from Theater Projects. He and his company will be the consultant for helping us design the 1,200 seat theater. And with that, I'll turn it over to John to say a couple words.
John didn't know we were going to put a 3-foot image of him on the screen here, but and also John's he's got to drive back to Connecticut, so he's not going to stay for all the excitement of the meeting. But we thought we'd get him in here and introduce him to you folks.
Great, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to work on this project and Theater Projects. We're a firm. If you don't know about us, you should go on the website, World Wide Web, theaterprojects.com. RE spelt like the British way, because we were founded in Britain about 63 years ago. And it was started by a theater lighting designer, Richard Pilbrow. And so our background really is theater, but Richard realized many years ago that theater is more than just technical requirements. There's a lot going on, and architects know this fully well too. There's the design of the space, which we are really get involved with, and getting the right scale, the right balance. And that's what we hope to help the team do, is create this great facility. You have a lot of ambitious things you want to put in there. It's like such a wide range of uses, and we're going to try to accommodate them all. We welcome your input on it, and hopefully as a team we can create a great project.
Thank you very, very much, John. So we're really excited to have them on board. They're really experts in this type of design of the facility, and so we knew we had sort of one shot to get this right, and so we really brought in the experts on this one, and so they're going to challenge us on our thinking, and we're going to take advantage of having their expertise every step of the way here. And so we got off to a really exciting start tonight, and we're going to continue this, and you'll start to see the results of this in the upcoming meetings, and it really is going to start to take some shape. So thank you very much, John.
Thank you for coming.
Have a seat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Drive carefully.
So with that, we are going to do subcommittee updates. Athletics and site, and I know we have these sort of topics we had set out with, and some groups are excelling in taking several topics at once, and some are kind of finding what is the topic they really want to sink their teeth into. So we had the title of concessions/boosters, but Scott, do you want to bring us up to speed on sort of what you guys talked about and where the conversation took you?
Certainly. Well, welcome. It's good to have everyone back together. We examined some site plans, had some good discussions over the overlap of the discus and javelin, and then the shot put, and then where can that be moved, and the possibility of the shot put being relocated and the javelin and discus overlapping. Definitely a lot of discussion over storage needs and what that could look like. There was a consideration of putting storage underneath the bleachers, and that becomes a major design and has a major design and financial impacts. So we kind of discussed, but really looked at some of the other more pressing needs as far as the size and shape of the openings for storage. So we kind of shifted away from that, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't a discussion point. Found some storage areas in the lower right-hand corner of the track that could be used to store all of the pieces that would be needed for the stadium, and not just track, but also it's just lacrosse and any of the goals that get used throughout the season. And then we looked at a concession model for the outside. There was some discussion of having 2 windows versus 3 or 4. We discussed examining having dugouts and press box and storage and what that would look like, and also the ticket boxes. And then that started to lead into the lighting for baseball, and would there need to be lighting for softball and also tennis. So that really wasn't the pressing pieces, but it was worthy of us talking about it and would that be located. And then that really opened up into the conversation. So currently in the plans right now, we have a multi-purpose field adjacent to the stadium, and that has been identified as the other place to have the turf field. So as we started to examine is there a more efficient use of space by having the baseball field become a turf field, the multi-purpose field becoming a grass field, and that the baseball field actually truly does become the multi-purpose field. And that kind of frees up some space by what is now identified as the multi-purpose field being grass, frees up some space for the discus, the javelin, and the shot put, and allows for the baseball field, because it's already expanded to fit a field hockey field, if we continued with that line of thinking, have the same level of expansion and turn that into multi-purpose. The big hang-up becomes, does that conflict with Title IX, making sure that we have a baseball and a softball field that are equal and equal in considerations, and would that run into conflict? Todd was going to have some conversations with his counterpart over in Lewiston and what their thought processes were and how contentious that could be, so it doesn't open us up to a Title IX compliance issue by doing that. From an efficiency standpoint, it may possibly be able to do that, and then at the same point in time, the lights aren't, and that's where that conversation started to go down that path. There aren't lights on the softball field, and that certainly if it was just softball and baseball, we would be running into conflict with Title IX equal access for those 2 sports. But if it became the multi-purpose, would that allow for that to happen? It does bring in a level of efficiency, but does that put us in conflict with Title IX? So that is something that this group, I think, really needs to grapple with. I think from the athletic side, it was more of an I wonder, but because of how the proposal went through and the referendum went through, and that was based on the agreement of this group, I think that's something that this larger group needs to tackle. And then we moved inside, and we didn't get anywhere other than the concession stand, which was a joint venture of sharing concessions and tickets between the auditorium and the gymnasium, and was placed in that bar with the auditorium. Then there was definitely a level of disagreement on needing to have the concessions also needed to be positioned in the gymnasium. And so Melissa agreed to be able to explore taking some storage away from the PE and athletic and shifting the gym into that storage to create space, because in the model right now, the only way to get space is to move it out into the hallway, just theoretically, because there isn't any other space. It would be to shift the whole court down, take the space from PE storage and athletic storage, and create space at the top end of the gym facing the hallway to put the concessions in there. And so we would be faced with having, we would be in the situation of having 2 concessions and ticket entrance points. And my only feedback to that is that would get us some incredible pushback from the DOE. And then also, in order to do that, we would, in order to get that square footage and to put that at the hallway entrance, we would lose a section of seating. And so that, again, the group needs to grapple with that reduction in storage, and where would that be made up? And then how would the DOE respond to another concession area? And then the wishes of where we always built out of was the conversation of trying to keep the seating capacity about the same. The model that we have right now is about 200 seats less than what we have approximately, and taking that other section out would reduce the seating a bit more, and I couldn't give you that figure. We didn't get that far. So that really is where, as far as we ever got to the inside considerations of what was happening. The entire focus of the conversation had to do with the concessions. And in fairness to the concessions, they generate about $40,000 worth of income that is utilized for scholarships and funding of athletics, and all athletics. And it's not just 9 to 12, it's actually 7 through 12. And so that it is a very healthy consideration, but there are significant trade-offs going back and forth in terms of storage and what the DOE's allowance is on doing that, so.
So on that, Scott, where is it located?
I gotta get myself oriented. So here we are. So this is currently where we have put the rendering for the concessions and tickets. And the reason that is an efficient use of space is if you turn it this way, the auditorium angles upward, and so this is open space underneath.
Okay.
You get that stadium seating within an auditorium, which is pretty typical. It's not over the top anything. So by doing that, it opens up all of this space underneath. And so from an efficiency standpoint, that is where it was located, was right here. So now the conversation is, how do we get concessions in here? If you see this line, that's the end of the court, and there's only about 10 feet there. So the conversation became, what if we shifted it up here, but these are storage for PE and athletics, and there is no solution to where that storage gets made up. So this shifts to create space here, which takes out this level of seating right in here and puts the concessions in there.
Why do we need concessions on there? Why isn't that enough concession?
The point is that in order to get the staff to be fully invested in, from a sales perspective, having the concessions within the gym really enhances the amount of sales that they make during basketball games, both boys and girls. And so that it's a trade-off. It's a potential, I wonder, of what would that do for sales for people?
Are they selling directly into the gym, or?
Correct.
Has the Booster Club done any research on the other schools that don't have their concession stand in there, how much money they raise every year?
I don't have an answer to that.
Because we're unusual, correct, to have it right in there.
Sanford's is not inside.
So it'd be interesting to ask around, how much do they raise in concession? I know it is also to have the people who work there see the game. So I think it's also the people working it, correct?
I think Melissa was willing to examine it, but there are going to be some trade-offs, and some of them are truly going to be financial. And so I think that is an impact that this group is going to need to grapple with as well. At this point, it's something that Melissa will examine and see what can be done. And I can certainly ask that the grandstand see if they can try to find some, reach out to counterpart. What makes us a little unique is that many of our surrounding schools have a booster club for each individual sport, where ours supports everybody. And so that may present some level of challenge of trying to get apples to apples and not apples to oranges, but I can certainly ask them to see what other groups do and what they've seen and what they have for income.
You had a question?
If you moved it closer to the gym and you had like windows on each side, and like say if there's a basketball game, you shut the windows on the hallway side and have them open on the other side, and then vice versa if there's something going on in the auditorium, you can't.
I don't understand.
She's saying have a window that opens up into the gym and one into the hallway,
Right,
Like
right.
we do now, don't we? Don't we have a window in the foyer and
No space in the gym.
Yeah,
and a window inside?
we can look at configurations, but I think that those are difficult given the configuration of the way that the
Right.
two spaces are arranged right now and how the lobby is. But I think we understand the desire is to have that directly onto the gymnasium, and so the sacrifice is most likely the storage component in order to accommodate that.
Mark, I think it's appropriate, though, as Katie said, for us to research it, Scott. So what's Mount Blue doing, what's Sanford doing, what are the other schools doing with this, too? I appreciate the money,
Yes,
but I think we need to take and look on it, too.
So is that a exercise that the subcommittee is going to undertake, Scott, I guess, or is that a booster?
It appears it will.
Okay, all right, great.
Thank you,
Athletic
Scott.
Subcommittee. Scott, did you have anything else on the athletic subcommittee?
Was a lot.
It was. I didn't mean to downplay
No,
it.
no, I'm.
What else do you want, Lisa?
You cover a lot in an hour.
I don't know if you're, and also I don't know if you're looking in terms of the Title IX issues and who, I think you've suggested that belongs at the building committee level as well, so.
Yeah, these are two major considerations that I think really, they have design and financial impacts. And we're still sorting and gathering, and I couldn't tell you that the subcommittee feels strongly this way or strongly that way. But it's certainly both of those, the shifting of the fields and the concessions are definitely, this is the group that really will need to end up ultimately having the final call on. I think that group would probably like to have a little more information before that they could say this would be our recommendation. And both of them, like, how does that play into Title IX? And is it, because it does seem like it may create some efficiencies from a site plan for ourselves, but we certainly don't want to either run into violation of Title IX or even the perception. I can tell you the value of perception greatly over the last 8 months and how important that plays out. And so I think that's real important to keep in mind as a community of what we do. And then the element of what we do with the concessions, because there really will be some trade-offs there. And they're all compelling. There isn't one that is more compelling than the other, because we definitely have a booster group that is probably one of the strongest and most diligent and passionate anywhere. I'd put them up against anywhere. And so it's very worthy to examine that, but we also certainly have to balance that with what the allowances are for the DOE and then what is the trade-off in the rest of the design. Because as we were going through the site, the conversation continuously comes up about storage. Like, all of these things are real important. Well, storage outside of the building is as much a premium as it is on the inside of the building. And so that is, in my mind, that's a big deal too. And so I would be eager to see what could potentially come from the work that Harriman's can do to try to squeeze and pull. And I'm not saying there's a whole lot of space left to squeeze and pull, but it's worth examining.
Question, is there going to be a cost to move the turf field into the baseball field and all that? And so we'll have to look at money-wise.
I think from what we were discussing, what Frank was talking about, and these are real approximations. So if we were to there's already some exploration going on grants for the second turf, because that became part of the conversation of what did the referendum truly support. So that is being pursued, and it's happening as we speak. The other piece is that by doing just that multi-purpose field, the way we're talking about 400,000, and what Frank, and again, these are all extreme approximations, to shift it over to the baseball field to become that, we are adding so we're talking about 500,000. And if Frank's here, am I way out of line? Is that about?
It's about 100,000 difference. So I have a question. are our hands tied with the amount of money that we said we'd fundraise? Or do we have some latitude to shift money from here to there?
So I don't think there's any maximum that you can fundraise for. So if you want to fundraise for more, you certainly
Because
could.
I thought, I was under the understanding that we had a top figure. Is that the top figure of the whole thing? Because I know that particular piece, the second turf, was something that we put in the referendum, and the source of that was, I don't know, did we have a figure for that?
I think that figure was built on the original multi-purpose being the turf.
Correct. So, no, I think the referendum sets the maximum for taxpayer dollars.
Yes.
So if we're about to shift budget because of concessions and turf and the square footage and all that, and we calculate that now the project's $500,000 more, then we have to fundraise the $500,000. Now, the problem's going to be is the DOE, and correct me, Mark-Lise, if I'm wrong, the DOE has approved a project. So to shift the project around, I think we're going to have to go back to the DOE and have a whole conversation about that, because you can't just say, well, we approved you for this amount of dollars, spend it the way you want it.
Right.
No.
Right.
You were allocated
Marked in
funds
certain avenues.
to
Correct.
get these spaces and even your fundraising. It's in the budget workbook is what is being paid by the state, what's being paid locally, and what may be fundraised, which was the turf field. So you
what
can't
was that
turn around and
figure?
say, well, we're adding this amount of dollars and we're going to do this. They didn't approve that.
What was the figure for the second turf field?
The answer, there is a ceiling on the total project cost.
Right.
Now,
Brian,
whether,
you have, Brian
whether
has
we
a
have to
question.
stick to the second turf field number that's in there, I
Right,
don't know, but there
probably
is a
not.
number in the referendum
Oh,
question
what
of
was it?
585, 418.
Yeah,
That was for
585.
construction costs. There's other multipliers on top of that as well.
Brian, did you have a question?
Question and a comment. The question is, wasn't the original plan to have the baseball field turfed, and therefore we would already have the 500 versus the 400 allotted? And two, I get really nervous about looking at the total and not committing ourselves to those individual items that were listed. You know, if we decide to go over on one project, I hope it wouldn't be at the sacrifice of another.
Good point.
Give an example.
We go over, I don't know, $200,000 on a baseball field, therefore, I don't know, I'm making stuff up, but the practice field in its entirety would just go away. We don't have any money for any of it. Bad example maybe, but again, we came up with that total dollar amount based on itemized things.
Correct.
And I would think we'd be committed to those things.
Correct.
And not just look at a total dollar amount that might be funneled into.
No, it's all allocated, you're right. The turf field was for the multipurpose field, it was not for the baseball field.
Well, the baseball field I thought was listed as both originally, is that right?
Oh, who are you pointing, Frank? Frank, was that originally?
It was discussed last year
Yeah,
as the baseball field being the second turf field.
right.
But we moved on.
Apparently it got shifted, and I don't remember exactly when.
When that happened.
Mark, I don't know if you remember when that got shifted to the being multipurpose.
Yeah, I'm not on the athletic subcommittee, but during the course of time, I know that the discussion had moved to having it being the one next to the football / multi-use field at the stadium, and so it shifted from being the baseball field to that one, and again, I'm not clear on exactly when that shift occurred, but it did happen. That is the way it's been presented to the public and to the state, and so so that is a consideration. We want to review that with DOE in terms of if there's a decision right now that you want to shift. I think there's question of how does that square with the total amount that was included in the project that went to referendum? Because that local amount that was for the multipurpose field, turf, the additional amount, even though it was locally fundraised, it was still included in the referendum that went to the voters. So that's,
And what is that figure?
I got to dig it up, but there was the amount for the second turf field on one of the project budgets is, around the 500 and something.
585, 418 is the amount in the referendum.
There you go.
But I am noticing the note at the bottom of the referendum question talks about additional grants and donations above the listed amount will be used to, and then one of the options is, or to pay additional costs of a second turf field.
Right.
So it sounds like there's some
flexibility
flexibility there within the referendum question that was approved.
Also, the concession, interior concession portion was locally funded too. And so something to keep in mind that square footage that was allocated, 400 square feet that was allocated for the concessions that is shown in the bar of right now next to the theater was a local expense that was built into the questions too. So being mindful of that as well, so.
Brian?
So it sounds like some people have the understanding that what we pitched to the DOE was the standalone multi-purpose field, yet those figures would suggest otherwise, that maybe it's for a more expensive baseball field?
No, I don't think so. I think we'll go back and look at the order of magnitude of what the expenses were, and because the state says, you got to make sure that you carry not just the top layer of turf, but in our calculations for that estimate that went to the state were based on the size of the multi-purpose field, not the baseball field. So the corresponding size and amount of money that was allocated for that was based on that field in that area. So.
Yes, right. If we don't get the second turf field, let's say we don't raise the money for the second turf field, we have a multi-purpose field that would be grass, correct? So I think the state is supporting a multi-purpose field. We need to locally fund or raise for it to be turf. So we have to price out what the turf would be on the baseball field. If everything's grass, but you want to add a turf to one of the fields, we need the cost on if it was to be at the baseball field. What is the differential on that? And then we'll see where we go.
So I hear you, but it sounds like we're saying two different things.
Okay.
Because we know what the DOE is going to provide,
Yes.
and we know what the city has also approved in the referendum.
Correct.
So
Right.
when you say that they're gonna provide grass and we have to fundraise the rest, well, no, not the rest unless we go over a certain dollar amount that the city approved.
The city did not approve paying locally the second turf field.
Right.
They're not paying for the second turf field. We have to raise the funds for that. And they agreed if we raised the fund, we could have it.
And there's a figure of what's
Was 585.
585. So if that could be used,
Right.
it sounds to me that a multi-purpose could be a baseball field because it's being used for more than one purpose.
As a clarifier, we had to identify everything that would be in this project, whether it was fundraised or not. And so that's why it's in there. We had to say, this is something that we will be fundraising for, so that then it would be included in the design of the project, per the DOE.
But we may still have to go back and say, is this our leeway?
Yeah, we can ask the question,
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. It sounds like from the language that Adam just was reading from, that there's some latitude in terms of if the desire is, and everyone thinks about compliance issues, to use the baseball and that costs more money. It sounds like there is latitude in the question that went to the voters to be able to expend more if you fundraise for more. And I think the DOE would fine, because that, again, if you're going to fundraise for more and pay for a larger artificial turf field, then I don't think they're going to have issue with it.
As long as we identified it.
We've identified that there
We
could be
needed
a
to
second turf
identify
field in
everything.
this project.
You're saying that referendum includes no second artificial turf surface?
It includes it, but not the funds with it. So I'll tell you why. So there's a budget workbook, and so as we come through with contingencies, funds, and so forth, if there's funds there that was raised, it gives a permission to use some of those funds to offset the cost of the turf field.
Second turf field.
The second turf field. So it gave permission that if we have local tax dollars or in the project with our local contingency fund dollars, that we could use that to offset the second turf field. But it did not, the total amount in what will be collected from the taxpayers pay for the second turf field. But it allows, if there's funds available through the project savings or contingency funds, that it could be put towards that.
Or
But we won't
fundraising.
know that until we get into the project.
David?
That's why they had to approve it, to allow us to use funds that, if we hadn't gotten that in there and we had contingency fund leftover money, we wouldn't be able to use it. So it gives us permission to use it.
If we have.
Okay?
Dave? you
I
had
know it's,
something?
Yeah,
trying to
or
make-
fundraising, right?
or fundraising, yes. But there may
Or
be
grants.
contingency dollars that could go towards the second turf field.
It
Yeah,
falls
and-
We
under
won't know
other
that.
funding.
And a lot of that was worked out as we were all understanding what would be put into what question and how much the ask was going to be of the local share when we were getting through the process of getting ready for the vote in June. So that's when pieces considered what was going to be locally funded, what was going to be then done through fundraising or unused contingency.
I mean, that second turf field is almost last to go in the project to be put on. Everything will be set up, and then where are we for the second turf field?
Performing arts?
All right, performing arts.
No, it's all good questions.
It was a wonderful question. We covered
Because
a
we
lot of ground.
worked a lot with the bond and how that question was written
Right.
in order to allow it.
Yeah.
So a lot of work went into that.
Yeah, and as a clarifier, if we
Yeah.
didn't identify something to be used other funds towards, it could not be in the project. So if it's not identified in there and you're raising funds, those extra funds are helping to pay down the bond amount.
Right.
So if we didn't identify that second turf field as something you can use other funds for, the DOE would not let us put it in the project.
So we couldn't go and just put a pool on if we,
Correct.
someone
Correct.
handed us
Doesn't
$6
matter
million.
how many-
Right, you couldn't say, oh,
funds
well, we
you
have a savings
raise.
of 500,000, we're going to go get this now.
Yeah.
No.
That makes sense.
Have to be entirely separate contractual project and
And go out to bid, go
Yeah.
out to bond and public vote again, yes.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, performing arts, John?
Yeah. So the interesting, one of the interesting dynamics we have found about some of the performing arts is, right now we've got the spaces, we've got a track, we've got, a gym, we kind of know how those function in our space now and what the community likes to see. One of the interesting things, but one of the, actually, I think the exciting things is we don't have a 1,200 seat auditorium right now in the community. So we're trying to, in some ways, make best guesses as to how we're going to see it used. And when I say best guesses, we're lots of discussions, we're bringing in shareholders that are going to be able to help us make very educated, very informed decisions on this. So kind of one of our take-homes is, one of our kind of next steps is, what does our yearly calendar look like? We've really talked about that through all our multiple meetings. We just need to kind of say, okay, we're looking at bringing in this group at this time, and as best as we can do. We've looked out. You guys can get on, Ticketmaster.com and see who's coming to Westbrook Performing Arts and who's coming to Sanford High School, who's going up to, the Collins Center up, and we can start having somewhat of an idea of the kind of groups that are coming in to the state. So we can start looking at some of those kind of things. And this is the advantage of having the consultant in that we don't have to go digging, what does, this group from this, actually need, because they've done a lot of that legwork. So we say, hey, these are the kind of groups, and then they'll be able to go and be like, oh, great, this is what we need. This is the kind of place we need. So we're going to start building some of that kind of thing. One of the big things, and then within the city, looking at, which we've again already done, a lot of this legwork, but really putting together a list of, these are the kind of groups that we're going to be coming in. We're going to be having our musical once a year. Are we, over the summer, going to be looking at CLT, going to be looking to come in and do one of their musicals over the summer? Kind of some of those discussions that we've already been having. the middle school band, the high school band, the all-city chorus, all-city band. I mean, some of those things that we already know happen every single year, but really kind of putting that together. And then that allows John and his team, which it's actually a very large team, to then go and run with that, to kind of see what we're looking for. One thing we discussed is right now we have a musical, but that's not going to be the big use of our auditorium. We're going to be having band concerts in there. We're going to be having, the high school assemblies coming in. Those kind of things are the type of things we're kind of looking at, and that's the thing that John and his team need to know as they move forward. The space that we have, we all know that one block in there, kind of looking, and this is why we have John in here. He's like, well, it's going to be maybe a little more narrow because of the size, and he's the expert at it, and so I'm just kind of certainly relying on his expertise at that. So we're going to start looking at some of those really nitty-gritty details of getting down to how do we design that space to be the most functional for how we need it, and then getting to all the other things. And this, I won't get into all the details, but like, what type of floor do we need? And I'm like hearing all these terms that I'm learning, a resilient floor versus a sprung floor, and all not concrete, and all these kind of things. And that really goes into are the dance centers going to be coming in, and some of those kind of things that we need to make sure we're designing this well, so we have these and we think about these things, and then starting to talk about what are the things we have to do now, that if we don't do now, we're not going to have, or it's going to cost us millions of dollars to retrofit. So we want to make sure we're making some of those decisions. What are the kind of things? Yeah, if we need to upgrade the soundboard in a few years, okay, we can find it in the school budget, or those kind of things. But if you don't put a catwalk in now, you're not going to. Those kind of things. So that's kind of some of the things where we're at. Our big thing is what's our next steps, is really that schedule. This is who's going to be using the auditorium over the course of a year.
And students will be first.
Students are first, yep. Yes, of course. And that really, and we even said that to John, that's where our 1,200 seat number came from. And we made that very clear, that's, our student population. And we were very clear, bringing elementary schools in, and had some of that discussion. Fairview coming in is different than East Auburn coming in, and that's okay. And how do we look at that? And then talking about, again, all these terms that I've just learned tonight, the rake, meaning how high does it go? Do we put a balcony in? I mean, some of those discussions. So John's gonna, now that he's got some really good ideas of where we want to go, he'll now start building kind of some thoughts. Anything else from that standpoint?
I thought it was a really, really great conversation. Lots of questions from lots of folks. We had great representation from, choral, band, different theaters. So it was a really dynamic conversation.
Yeah, one of the other really great points that was brought up is the idea of trying to use our facilities, not necessarily like, we talked about the tech shop, for instance, and the idea of, are there other locations or curricula that can be involved in creating sets, not thinking about just confined to work that would happen in the tech shop itself. And so the same thing with the broadcast media and the idea of, can that be integrated into it? So really thinking about not just the theater in isolation, but its integration across the entire school as well.
Questions? Anybody? Okay. Sustainability and building systems. We missed you, Lisa,
I know.
on it, but Jeff did a really good job.
I knew you were in good hands.
Yes, we were in very good hands. We talked about what we need to do next to get the building ready to be up and going when the shovel goes in, and we need to think about it before the shovel goes into the dirt. So the first thing that we talked about is that we need a commissioning agent.
Mm-hmm.
We need to think about a commissioning agent right off on it. We also need to think about an owner's rep. So we went from talking about what the building material is going to be, how we're going to heat it, to, okay, this is serious, guys. We need to start thinking about the commissioning agent. We need to start thinking about the owner's rep. And this is beginning of the money to be spent on it. So we're looking at that. Brandy wasn't here tonight, but she's talked for a year and a half about grants and all that good stuff. So Brandy's hopefully going to be here the next time, and we can start talking about it. on it, see if we can reduce some of the money that we
Brandy
need.
did reach out to us about starting grants specifically actually for the turf field, and so we're starting to feed her information on
Okay,
that.
good. We have remembered that we have geothermal wells going on. We talked about maybe a potential of solar somewhere along the line, maybe somewhere in there. We talked about softening the look of the building on the inside, making it look warm. This would be warm with this wood here, or as in Sanford, it was the polished concrete that looked so nice and warm on it. We talked about trees being cut down, red oak being cut down in the area, and maybe they could be ready for an inside somewhere in the library or the main hallway or wherever on it. That would be red oak from people's property that we know. That would be cut down and used. We talked about a window. When we all visited other schools, we saw how, I think it was Bridgewater, had the window showing the controls. I call it the guts of the building, how it's heated, how it's whatever it's doing on it. We talked about maybe having a window somewhere on the first floor so that you could see what was going on. We got to talking about robots being able to use, really neat robots that could be used in those areas so that it would always be shifting on it. We talked about cameras going every which way in a heating part of the building or whatever part of the building we're looking at. So we talked about all of that. We also talked about, there was a discussion about recycled water, rainwater being used. I think that we beat that right to death on it, that probably was not going to work on it because of the straining of the water that was coming out. You know, we didn't want anything to happen to our systems, so we were looking maybe not at that now. But we're moving on, but the first thing that we need to start doing is that we need to have the commissioning agent and the owner's rep. We need to do that. And we'll have to go out to bid on that, I believe, on it.
We'll start putting together proposals for the commissioning agent probably in the next couple weeks. So
Okay.
we can get that out on the street. We'll want them on board in advance of the end of the design document phase so they can be reviewing the documents and meeting with you guys and understanding the requirements for the systems.
Can you just give a quick one-liner? What's a commissioning agent once the owners? Sorry, thank you.
So I will try my best on the commissioning agent. Jeff's the expert,
Yes,
but essentially a commissioning agent is coming in to help write the owner's project requirements and the basis of design, working with the design team to do that. And really, they're more checking it, reviewing that to make sure that they understand how you want these systems to function. Then they're reviewing our design documents to make sure the design speaks to how you want it to function. And then as it's going in to be built, they're checking and monitoring the contractor, testing the systems to make sure they're actually functioning the way they're designed. So it's really a overall checks and balance to make sure that your whole system is working the way it should be. They're also looking for efficiencies along the way. Owner's project manager is really more towards the construction and also in bidding, but more of the point person for the owner in construction to answer questions, run pertinent things by the owner group, but are really the point person for the contractor and architect during construction.
It's not the clerk of the works.
It is not the clerk of the works. Clerk of the works is on site usually every day, making sure that the contractor is executing the design intent of the documents and is really the architect's eyes and ears daily on the project, but we're also just right down the street, so we'll be there as well.
Sue, you have anything to add?
No, I think you got it all.
You too? Okay. Thank you very
Did I
much.
do okay, Jeff? Okay, with that, we will go on to community use and partnership.
So at our last meeting, we had Sabrina Best from the rec department, and we had Rob Callahan as well as Holly Lasagna. None of them were able to be there tonight, but it was an interesting thing that happened. So last week we spent our last meeting we
Michelle,
spent a lot.
love your mic.
Sorry?
Pull it
Pull it
closer
to-
to you.
Pull it close.
Thought I was echoing.
No,
Okay.
it's funny here. Nobody can hear you at home.
So, last meeting, we spent a lot of time talking about the groups that are associated with CTE who would be accessing, and the rec department. This week, we had Craig Latusha, who is the assistant principal at Edward Little, and Stephanie Hathaway, who is a citizen, and who had 2 students who went through and graduated from EL, and also was a teacher. So it was a very different kind of conversation, it made a really well-rounded, I think you're going to like what you see in here. So they started to think about what are some other types of partners that we would be looking at. And by the end of it, of course, Mr. Latusha was fundraising, so I'll send him your way.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
Because he was covering
I like
it
the
all.
cross-pollination
It
between
was.
the
There was a
groups.
lot of cross-pollination. So what I liked about this, and I'll try to capture it without going down through every single idea that they came up with, was they were really thinking about what are some other groups and organizations that might want to access. But even beyond that, who could we reach out to foster that sense of belonging in our community with all groups? And how would they see accessing this hub, community hub, as benefiting them in a sense of belonging in our community? So it was a great thing. So examples, what does that mean? Well, civic functions. So beyond the voting and that sort of thing, what about naturalization ceremonies, which already is being talked about? What about things like political debates coming to our community and accessing, having our students involved as moderators perhaps in those events as well? What were some other things? Yeah, there were a lot of them.
Like the aging community, the senior citizen group?
We talked about that. That came up last time, but it came up again, and they really expanded on what that might look like, and could we open up a section during the weekend for walking in the winter for some groups, and how could we promote those sorts of activities for groups that don't have another space to be at. Let's see, there were so many good ideas. Even homeschool groups, homeschooling groups, how could they access some of this as a resource and feel like they had a place and belonging with that? Religious organizations, that there are religious organizations that are looking for all sorts of access. They might go over to the Colosseum. Why couldn't they maybe access in our own organization here, or our own school here? Student groups, prom, right in their own school, that came up, having their prom there as opposed to going someplace else. But what I really liked, they got talking about alumni organizations. How to have our alumni feel they are part of our community, even though they might be living away. How do we keep them connected in that sense of belonging here at Edward Little? And so that Edward Little remains an important place to them. And I think that came up out of, certainly we're all focused on the 150th celebrations that are going to culminate here soon. And I think that percolated, how do we keep that going, and is there a way? And they came up with lots of great ideas around how that could be. And that's where the fundraising came in, and we'll send it in your direction. So they might actually, from your standpoint, and the question that was posed originally for us, have very similar and not pose any great differing sorts of architectural considerations. But as Lisa and I were talking, it will give us something to go on, in programming and thinking about how do we reach out to the community this way. So there's nobody else here from the group, but any questions?
I think there's a lot of overlap
There
between
is.
my group, because I think our design function, that's really where we're at right now for our design steps, is identifying those partners and what I mean, we don't need, yes, you're gonna come in the third November of every single year, you know, or the third, you know what I mean? You know, we're not looking at that, it's like, hey, what kind of space do you need? You know, what are you looking for, that kind of thing.
And just visioning that out, so that we
Exactly.
don't limit ourselves. I think I heard that in what you were saying, like, we don't limit ourselves just to what we already know, because we haven't had an auditorium before. Same with the fields, you know, how do we vision that out beyond just what we've used already? And I've heard some talk about that, but, you know, tournaments and partnering with St. Dom's turf field and Lewiston's turf field to open up more possibilities. That came up again tonight, so.
Good. Thank you.
Excellent.
It's
Thank
exciting.
you, Michelle.
Fundraising?
Fundraising.
I've got a comment in that regard. I'm not on that subcommittee, but right now, I think Auburn has a reputation where the schools are not that accessible, or as accessible as they should be. So I'm glad that those conversations are going on, and I hope it's not just lip service, and I hope it doesn't come with $4,000 an hour type of fee to make that happen. But I'm glad those discussions are happening.
Okay, let's do fundraising.
Okay, so fundraising, and Brian, we missed you, but I understand where your passion's headed around that, so we get it. I did mention your idea, though. Okay. Leonard was there taking notes. Thank you, Leonard. And we had Lucy, coaches from, she's a parent and a teacher, and then Craig Gibson was with us as well to help the conversation. And so we really kind of kept making our list of lead donors. So we worked on that and assigned who was going to approach whom in the next few weeks and be touching base. We brainstormed all the areas that could be named if we choose, so we started doing that. You know, we think the alumni weekend is probably too soon, perhaps, to roll out anything significant, because a lot of work has to be done before that, and it's not that far away. And so recognizing that most of the money needs to come from individuals or corporations or groups, and not necessarily
Taxpayers.
like taxpayers or small donations. And we want to be careful we don't do small donations, and people who could do large donations feel they've done the small donation and not realizing. So we would have to, you know, really do major work before the alumni weekend to really have something thoughtfully planned and put out. But that doesn't mean this is the only alumni weekend that has to happen in the next 4 years either. So the other thing we talked about is the possibility of hiring someone to help run the fundraising committee, and I shared that I had reached out to one person whose name has come up and they're unable to do it. And we've talked to some others, but we're still putting out feelers around the possibility, and if we have the funds for that, that's something school committee is going to have to discuss, whether they will allocate funds or even at the finance committee. We reached out to Bath School Department because when Peter Creighton was here, city manager for the fundraising, he had a connection there, so I talked to the superintendent. I don't know if it's Bath, but RSU 1. Is that Bath? Okay, thank you. And they happen to have a citizen who had done fundraising, was willing to step up and do it very part-time, a few hours a week. So over 3 years, I think they paid around $28,000 or so, and they raised about, don't quote me, but around $800,000. That's not nearly the $3 million to $5 million we're looking for. They didn't do a lot of naming push, so they didn't do a lot with that. They had one large donor lead, and then they worked on that. So there's a lot of facets to it. obviously. And so right now, we're really just trying to see if we can get more lead donors to help, because it's going to be the smaller things that finish the race, not start the race. And I think that's what's hard. You know, Alumni Weekend, you could sell something and make $10,000, but that's not really where we're at right now. Right now, we're looking at big donors rather than small things that the whole community can get behind.
Will there be somebody at the Alumni Weekend representing the school and the project?
Well, on Sunday, EL needs to be open between 9 and 1. So I'm guessing we will be there. So
We will be there.
we will be
yes.
there, we'll have things up.
Wearing many,
we'll have-
many hats.
We have
Looking
a-
forward to welcoming people into the building. It will be a great opportunity for
Right.
people to see it, ask questions about this project, and really remind themselves why Edward
Yeah,
Little,
we have the big
as an
picture.
entity, is a special place, and Auburn is a great place.
And while they probably will, will bring up that the new school is being built, it's not necessarily the place to make the asks that we
Correct.
need, that we
Right,
need to
but
make.
to plant the seed.
Yeah,
At the
sure. I
seats,
mean,
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
hopefully.
We can do
they should-
something.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if we are inviting people into Edward Little to have a guest book with their addresses and names and emails.
That's a great idea.
Credit card numbers.
Yeah, we
Yes,
can do
that's
that.
good.
Yeah.
So that we can use
We can get
it.
the queue, Leonard, you and I can run them right there, buddy.
I like it. Yeah, so we have to work out the details. Sunday is the day at EL, we're doing a pancake breakfast.
Doing a pancake breakfast.
We are.
The school department?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that we were doing a pancake breakfast.
Well,
but
you,
okay.
it's,
Who doesn't like pancakes? Come on.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Are we doing it
well,
outside?
it was talked about at the 150th, and then it made it onto the poster. So
Okay.
when we saw it on the poster, we said, oh, I guess it has been decided. So we're doing the pancake breakfast. We're going to be open for tours and looking at things, and they're
At the high
having a track race.
It's a fun run.
There's a fun run on the track. There's a breakfast at EL, and then it will be open for alumni to visit and take pictures and be nostalgic.
And sign the guest book.
And sign the guest book, get some information. So even if for fundraising, we put out we can put out something to
Yes.
hand out.
Yes. It would be nice, supposedly, we're going to have these pictures of the high school, the designs.
Yeah, so we'll work, and we
Yeah.
have some videos now. We have live
Good.
3D, not live, but 3D imaging, so we could set up 3D imaging for people to look in goggles. So we're working on it.
Plant the seed. What else do we got going here? Anybody else have any comments on fundraising? Okay, communication, Adam.
Yep, so Beth Favreau and John DeLorme and I met and sort of talked about there may not be a lot going on right at the moment for communications, but we want to be ready when the time comes. So one of the things John is going to work on is talking with Mr. Neer about social media presence for the high school and how might we increase that and get some things active so that we're ready to go when there's something to really launch out to the public. And then the other thing is we just want to be available to the fundraising subcommittee or any of the other subcommittees. If you need us, then we want to jump in and do whatever is needed to help.
We have hard hats and chainsaws, so.
Well, we can do that too, Bonnie. Yep, so we're basically ready when needed and welcome input from the subcommittees or from the committee as a whole.
A while ago, Chip Morrison used to have these sit down with Chip, or whatever he called it, on, does anybody remember these? And there was somebody from the community that Chip asked questions to. It was real stilted, but it was communications. People did watch it to see what was out there on it. And Dave, we have this wonderful thing in the back of the room here, right? We have Great Falls TV,
Yes.
and that's where it was, right? It was on Great Falls TV, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did it out of CM at the time, because I was a guest on it, but yes.
We-
I think
we
they
like
still
a-
do it. They still do it
We like a
in EL.
studio, but that can be done any place.
Yeah.
So,
I know of a studio.
you know where it's, okay, good. So, I mean, that's just another form of communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Katie is very
Adam, could be the
photogenic.
first speaker?
Brian?
How was this meeting communicated?
What, this meeting? This meeting is being taped. It's on air.
Oh, it means communicating that it's happening. Yeah.
How does the public know about this meeting tonight?
It's on our website, but we didn't blast out, so that's a job for communications. Yes. But yeah, the Sun Journal does.
Send things to communicate.
Right. Yeah. So the Sun Journal, I think you're right. runs
Well, the
it.
Sun Journal left.
No,
Yeah.
she's saying it's communicated
Oh.
in the Sun
I think
Journal.
it's part of their what's happening. Yeah.
The other thing is that we need to be sure
Yeah.
when this airs. It does not air tonight. It's not live, I don't believe. So
No, it's
it's
live.
taped. It's live?
No, we're on Facebook.
Great,
Right, we're on
fantastic.
YouTube, the YouTube channel?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
Yeah, the
YouTube,
YouTube
yeah.
channel.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
However, we have a ton of citizens out there that are not on YouTube, not on Facebook, and they they go to the channel 1302 and look for
Yeah.
community happenings. So when is this going to air again? Or when is this going to air?
So I'll find that out and we'll
Okay.
get it out on Facebook.
Good,
On the
thank you.
website.
Yeah, we'll put that on.
Okay, anybody else have any other things? Leonard?
Question for communication. There's a link or something on the webpage for asking questions. Does that get
Yes.
to, that gets to
Yep,
Katie?
They come
Okay.
to me.
All right.
Okay, anything else? Anybody have any other comments or anything? Lisa, what do you got going next?
Great. Wow. That was a lot of ground to cover. Great job on all the subcommittees. So last time we had talked about revisiting the work we did early in the project to start to look at the design patterns and the guiding principles and sort of the draft design statement. And we really we love the statement that you've come up with in the draft form, and we really like to try to condense it and synthesize it so it really captures the essence of what we're trying to do. And so we just wanted to spend a little bit of time revisiting the draft design statement, the guiding principles and the patterns, and then we came up with just sort of 3 sort of draft condensed statements and wanted to just open up a discussion to see if we're on par with kind of capturing what it is that you guys have here and maybe a one sentence phrase. And so with that, we'll look at the guiding principles and design patterns that we developed almost 2 years ago now. And so the guiding principles and design patterns have really been what has driven the design to date. We worked several working sessions to arrive at these and sort of the overlap between them. But I'll read the guiding principles: real-world connections and relevance, transdisciplinary instruction, project-based learning, pathways, or in parentheses, STEAM. And for anyone that doesn't know what STEAM means, and if I ever talk in an acronym and people don't know what it is, please stop me. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. College and career ready, community resource, flexibility and adaptability, identity, pride, ownership, celebrates learning, and outdoor connections. And there's several design patterns. I won't read through every one of them, but there were design patterns that were identified, and then we start to connect them to these guiding principles. And this is really what drove the layout and design of the building to date. So we took that design statement that we had done in a draft form, and that was part of the educational specifications we sent up to DOE, and we really looked to how do we capture the essence of what we're reading there. And again, this is just our take. We really want to hear from you guys. But what we came up with for one of the options was a dynamic and flexible community hub that fosters collaboration and celebrates experience-based learning. So that was option 1. Option 2 was a welcoming, safe, collaborative, vibrant learning environment where bright minds have the light to innovate. And number 3, is nurturing bright minds by fostering experimentation, exploration, and innovation. And so that, again, was sort of our take, and the idea of what this statement, or the reason we like to come up with this statement, is as we're designing, we keep checking in against the essence of what you're trying to do, and make sure that the decisions that we're making, and they're getting more granular by the day, are really capturing that essence of what you want this building or this community hub, as your statement kind of states, to reflect. And so, are there any of those that kind of jumped out at people, or do we want to kind of take those and
Can you go
mull
back to
them?
the longer one?
The longer one, yep, absolutely. So I'll read the longer one out loud. Draft design statement read, "The new Edward Little High School will be a safe, collaborative, vibrant learning community that is welcoming to all. A place where all learners build aspirations, strive for excellence, and develop agency. Personal and interpersonal skills that fosters individual success and enhances the community. A dynamic and flexible state-of-the-art community hub that fosters experience-based learning."
Any comments?
Option 1 was a dynamic and flexible community hub that fosters collaboration and celebrates experience-based learning.
Go to the next one too, please.
Option 2, a welcoming, safe, collaborative, vibrant learning environment where bright minds have the light to innovate.
Somewhere I'd like to see community in there,
In option 2?
somewhere in
Yep.
any of these, so that
I think the first one does talk about community hub.
Yep.
I think so too, I like.
But again, it could be a mix, it could be kind of a hybrid of any one of these.
Yeah, I like number 1.
I agree that it needs to include the community, but at the same time, this is a school, and I think that needs to remain an essential part. And I think a couple of them maybe lose that a little bit, where I think this one really hits on both, the community, but also this is a learning environment, and that's what it's designed for. So I do like this one.
Okay, anybody else? Katie?
Well, my only thing is experience-based learning, what does that mean?
Well, to me, it means something different. To me, it means a failed way of teaching, experience-based. Experience. We went to King Junior High, King Middle School, and they did experience. We tried it at the middle school,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
okay?
Expedition.
Yes,
learning.
thank you.
That's why I was looking at what in the, so if we take the essence of the first one, but celebrates what from the long statement, rather than it's innovation or it's experience-based learning, or that sounds to me very pigeonhole,
Not broad enough.
How about
very
celebrate
linear, rather than celebrates
lifelong learning?
excellence, or I'm trying to
Learning or something.
celebrates.
How about lifelong
Like if you
learning?
go to the big statement. We had excellence, individual success,
Enhances the community.
or builds aspirations. I'm trying to think of something that it could be any form of educational system that's going to bring us to that. Doesn't need to be defined.
So why are we reinventing the wheel when we have, why are we reinventing the wheel when we have 2030, that we, 2020, we can fill in up here?
Yeah, I thought of that too, yeah. You mean the mission statement
Right.
of
Right.
empowering all learners to
Right.
succeed in a,
World not yet imagined.
well, an ever-changing world. It changed.
Right.
Yeah. Right, so it could be that. Yeah, I know it's 7:45. So if you go back to the first now,
Yep.
So maybe you could clarify what exactly the statement is used for?
So the statement is used for several things. So we use the statement in designing the building so that we make sure that there is almost a lens that we can use to filter design decisions. So we look at this statement and say, okay, does this design decision, let's just say we use this one, does it really capture the essence of a community hub, or does it celebrate, in whatever term we use, by making this move within the design of the building? It also becomes sort of a tagline for the building and the design that you guys are promoting in the community. And it really is a statement, and then the building backs up that statement.
So this could well end up on promotional materials and all sorts of things over the next few years.
Absolutely, it could be a good communication tool.
You know, it could be celebrates multiple pathways to learning. You know, we have CTE, we have arts, we have, you know, different curriculum. So we're looking at multiple ways for students to learn in this school. I mean, that's what I was trying to think of. So it could be project-based, it could be innovation, it could be CTE, it could be college-bound, it could be, you know,
It talks to
there's
the
many
flexibility.
multiple opportunities for
Could be
students
learning
to
in
be
the theater, it could
successful
be
in their
learning.
learning or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You know, and the term community, I know we typically think of that as, you know, Auburn, but that can be, you can almost think of that as the high school community, the school community hub also.
Right.
Yeah.
Have multiple meanings, for sure.
Yeah, I think, and that's thinking about just inserting and celebrates multiple pathways to learning. It means the learning happens throughout life, and so it can be, part of that pathway is not only thinking about curriculum, but pathway is the journey that we're all on too, so.
And
kind of-
outside of time.
Absolutely.
Right.
4 years. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's actually nice.
I didn't want to narrow it
Yeah.
to be one way. Yeah.
All right, we all set with that?
No.
Are you okay?
No. Can you send me those three? I'd like to take a stab at it.
Good, good.
Because there's some elements here that need to be pulled together, and we don't want to pigeonhole, and we don't want to use jargon. We want some generalizations, but that are encompassing all of those pieces. And if I can have all three in front of me, I'd like to take a stab at it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Scott.
So it's a good
Just
conversation.
don't make it as long as the first statement.
I'll make it longer. No, I'm just kidding. One sentence. One
There you go.
sentence.
One sentence.
Absolutely.
Good.
Anybody else want to take
If we're going to
us-
hang our hat on
Yeah,
this,
we
I'd
can,
like
we
to
can
take a stab
send
at
them
it.
to everybody. We'll send the PowerPoint to everybody so they can see what they are, and we can come back
And
next
then
time
have
and
some
see.
proposals.
And
Yeah.
it's not a critique,
Nope.
like, I wanted to hear what people's thoughts and perspectives were on
yeah,
that.
no, I thought it
And
was
I
great.
just, I may use a term that means something different to another person, and
Right,
so I don't
exactly.
want there to be a misread on that.
I know that there's a lady here in the audience that has done a lot of work on NESAC, and she might be able to help you a little bit if you'd like some help with it. She's a good wordsmither.
We've done that together, and so
Yeah,
I
she's a good
certainly
wordsmither.
look to her grammatical support.
Right, and that's Pat Gucci, so. All right, next.
All right, so programming update. So our deep dive into programming, we've made a lot of good headway on the CTE programming. We still have more to do. We're reaching out to Rob to set up a couple tours to different programs so we can start to really dial in what those spaces look like, looking to start to understand what the advisory groups might be for each of those so we can start to ask specific questions about that. There's equipment that he had put together in some of his applications, so we're starting to get that information. So really starting to do a deep dive on the CTE program. Elements. We had some really, I think we reported on this last time, or maybe not, we had some really great just meetings with each one of the sort of instructors over at Lewiston about their programs, and they're really excited about some of the synergies with the high school that they're seeing. So some really fun conversations around that. We met with athletics, so the athletic director, Todd, and we met with Scott to go over athletic programming in some detail. And then In this PowerPoint, you'll see some proposed dates, and forgive me, Scott, I haven't run these by you, so they're just proposed for the open sort of storefront where we come and we sit in the school after the presentation to the staff. And there's also a couple meetings before that we might be able to execute before that meeting, just to keep the programming moving forward. That said, we've done a lot of development, and I say we, one of our colleagues here, Melissa's in the audience, who's done a lot of work on athletics. So a lot of detail in what we call the athletics bar. And the athletics bar, to remind the folks at home, is the auxiliary gym, the main gym, and really all the support spaces that go with that. So the storage, the locker rooms, health and PE classes, as well as the fitness area. And so this, it's hard to see, I know, but what it is it's starting to develop the working drawings and then starting to really get into some 3D images of what those spaces look like. And so we blew up the fun pictures a little bit more, and this is just very early development, so just starting to lay out the spaces where the interior windows are, how much equipment's fitting in there, what walls might have mirrors, starting to think about what type of materials are on the floor. And this would be the auxiliary gym. So this is the gym as you come right up to the front of the building with that big window, looking at a synthetic floor. You're starting to see skylights. You're seeing wall pads around the bottom. You're seeing acoustic panels around the middle section. So really starting to look at what type of sports are happening in this space, what type of lines do we need on the floor. So again, some really great detailed conversations, and Todd and Scott have been great with getting us a lot of information. And then here's some early renderings of the main gym. So you see in this picture the bleachers are pulled out. You have the main court and the basketball hoops, and then some nice visibility out into the hallway, and then the community entry.
And you're going to be able to see from the second floor into the gym? Is that the idea?
That's
there?
actually the entry vestibule. So the community entrance is a pretty tall space.
Oh, taller space. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
So it's going to feel pretty grand because right there you have the main gym and the theater right next to each other.
Awesome.
And so with that, we're continuing to dial in as much programming as we can, and we'll have a meeting with the staff on October 7th to bring the staff up to speed on where we're at with the project. After that, we'll send out a detailed survey to the staff to really start to collect some more detail about the different spaces that they're in, what some of their detailed needs are. And then set up what we call a storefront, and that's where Mark and I and others in our company will sit in the school for a couple days, and we'll have a schedule that we work through with Scott to identify what groups are coming to meet with us to talk through their survey result or survey answers, as well as any other information that they can provide at that time. And so, Scott, I've just put some dates up there, and I can get you a copy of this, but good, excellent, I love it. So CTE, we've done most of the preliminary programming. That's one of the more complex areas to program because there's so many components to each one of those programs. So that will continue to evolve. Athletics, we met October 14th. See it says to be determined there, but we did meet, not October 14th, but we met about 2 weeks ago at this point. I'm sure there will be some more refinement as we move forward. Classrooms and special education, as well as performing arts, art, music. Those are some of the storefronts we're looking to set up on maybe the 16th and 17th. And then any of those programs or meetings that we can front load ahead of that, like administration or library, kitchen, building and grounds, we're looking at maybe doing that around October 3rd. And then student engagement, we'll want to work with you, Scott, to figure out when we can start that process. It'll be probably several meetings with the leadership group, sort of a kickoff meeting, and then really getting into sort of how they can help us better understand the student experience of the building. So with that, we have the site plan. Our consultants are starting to fill in. We have Mainland Development performing the survey. You met John from Theater Projects tonight, who's the theater consultant. A Centec will be on board shortly as the acoustical consultant, and Advance is doing the educational technology. We've just put out proposals for geotechnical services, and we should see those shortly. And then another one we'll add on to this is the commissioning agent, and soliciting those as well.
A quick question on that.
Yeah.
So when you're hiring outside consultants, is all the cost for those consultants, that's built into the project?
It comes out of our fees, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Most of them come out of our fees, except for survey, geotechnical, our additional services, but the theater, the acoustics, the technology, that all comes out of the professional fees, and so we pay them directly.
Oh, so most of it, the money that that you're getting, and then you're paying
Correct.
those guys?
Yep.
Okay.
And those other ones, the survey, like, those are built into the workbook. Correct. Like, those are identified in the workbook.
Yeah.
Built in, but
I figured, I just
For all
didn't,
of the
just
projects.
wanted to understand.
The one other one that's identified or not identified is the kitchen consultant. We'll have someone help us with the food
True.
service piece too, so.
Okay, thank you.
And the floor plan, which up on this doesn't look like anything, has probably moved greatly from when you've seen it last time, but trust me in that there's a lot more detail on this plan, especially in the athletics bar, as well as starting to develop the commons area and some of the CTE spaces, so those bright green spaces have started to really take form. And then up on the second and third floors as well. And so our DOE schedule, seems like we haven't moved in their big schedule, but we're making a lot of progress. So as we all know, it's a long journey, but it will be well worth it when we're done. We started to add the bar here for the milestone. So we're, from when the referendum approved to the end of DD, we're about halfway through that process. So in the next probably month and a half, we'll have a lot of the programming meetings all wrapped up and dialed in, and you'll see, just like you've seen in the athletics bar right now, that sort of level of detail taking course across the whole building. And so with that, our schedule, so today's September 17th, our next subcommittee meetings are October 15th, and the building committee will follow at 6:30. And with that, we open it up if there's any questions.
Anybody have any concerns, questions, audience?
I have
any
celebrations.
Sue?
A comment.
Yeah.
I saw, the real estate ads, and it said that it's state-of-the-art high school. I thought that was pretty neat.
I
Cool.
noticed that too, yes.
They're starting to promote it already, so,
Yeah.
I mean, it gets people excited, I think. I was excited to see it, but.
Great.
Anybody in the audience, Pat? No? Okay. No? Okay. We don't have
Right
any
at 8
questions?
o'clock,
We're
my
8
heavens,
o'clock.
right on the dot.
Great.
Well, it was a challenge. I was challenged to see if we could make it by this hour.
We did very well.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We want to talk more?
All right, thank you.
Wait a minute, no, wait a minute.
We're adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming tonight.
You asked for it.
Yeah.